Hello, I'm Rhys Williams and welcome to my talk on digitizing the artifacts and excavations at Vindolanda. Now this does feature videos and 3D models which I hope will survive the zoomification process, but if they do show up choppy and you want to see for yourselves, feel free to scan any of the QR codes or follow the links, and these will take you to the digital models available on your phones, PCs, laptops, tablets and other devices. So I'm interested in how we can go from the current lay of the land to reconstructing and getting hands-on with the past. But what actually is 3D imaging? This involves taking lots of individual scans and measurements from all angles of an object. This may be achieved through projecting light patterns onto the object, where changes in the pattern are calibrated and measured to give the 3D surface, or by exposing lasers onto the object to record distances between the scanner and object, providing a cloud of laser data points. These are then combined to produce a single composite model of the object for display. Now, the combination of texture capture and 3D measurement results in precise geometric detail that can be used for analysis. This capturability is superior to photogrammetry, which flattens the 3D information within the 2D plane and cannot be used for accurate geomorphological analysis. However, 3D imaging is much slower than the click of a 2D camera, so is often reserved for objects of high interest or real museum engagement benefit. These models can then be shared with the public or researchers to significantly improve accessibility while still protecting the original object. So there are different types of scanners available depending on the scenario and budget. I mostly use a structured light scanner because I find the texture capture and post-processing much more effective and more streamlined. However, laser scanners are usually faster and can operate in brighter and outdoor conditions, so when scanning the environment, generally you can only use a laser scanner. CT scanners are also available for scanning more of the internal structure of an object. So what scenarios may we encounter? Firstly, environmental or terrestrial scanning can include cave systems, excavation sites, museums, buildings and landscapes. Artifact scanning often includes pottery, bones, statues and weaponry, but can essentially be applied to anything you could pick up with your hands. 3D imaging is particularly useful for the research mission of archaeology. 3D models are easily shared and made accessible worldwide, achieving larger sample sizes and databases for study. Geomorphological studies benefit greatly from this because we can measure models with pinpoint precision and annotate them with the measurement location to ensure standardization across future studies. For example, the collection of bat crania, modelled from several natural history museums, showed previously unknown diversity in their morphology. 3D imaging also allows us to access artifacts from inside the display cabinet when exploring the museum, but can also facilitate access to reconstructed museums and sites from afar, such as in schools or at home. The education mission also benefits greatly because we can bring archaeology directly into the public's hands without risking the original object. Projects involving 3D imaging are often considered ambitious and inspirational to individuals of all ages and abilities, ensuring deep engagement and inclusivity. So now I'm going to go over a couple of different case studies to show how I've used 3D imaging at Vindolanda to give some prompts and ideas for your own digital considerations. The first project will look at human crania discovered 10 years apart. So here we have 2D images of the crania, the left one being so delicate that this may well have actually been the last time it's taken out of the display cabinet. When analysing 3D models, it may be best to temporarily remove the textures so that the features do show up a bit better more clearly. So here we have two grooves in the frontal bone in red that do look similar to sharp force trauma marks. There's extensive fracturing on the sides of the cranium and some depressions on the endocranial surface on the inside of the cranium. There's also a fracture in the palatine or roof of the mouth, which has been interpreted as being caused by forcing the head onto a pike. So basically, don't pick a fight with the Romans. Similarly, the second crania was scanned, processed and reviewed to show several grooves similar to the sharp force trauma and grooves in the previous cranium, and fractures that contributed toward the separation from the rest of the cranial vault. These 3D models can now be shared with trauma specialists to compare against the micromorphology observed in experimental studies and determine more likely contexts. But the real interest of this talk is, of course, 3D. When scanning and post-processing, the textures can pop out beautifully. Being able to shine oblique lighting helps to pick out the normally faint grooves so much more clearly, and so these are available on Sketchfab to view at home. Now, the great thing with 3D scanning, of course, is, after some extensive post-processing, being able to 3D print these models and get hands-on. So this involves a bespoke preparation and thickening of the digital model before printing it upwards in successive layers. Now this is printed, we want to remove all of this extra support material, so we just leave it to soak in a hot bath for a couple of days until the support gently melts away, leaving us with a really nice clean model. For contextualized display. This is so important with objects such as these because, as I mentioned earlier, the cranium was held onto a pike, and these cause marks inside the cranium. Those depressions on the endocranial surface and the inside, you can actually feel these with your thumb or finger when rubbing on the inside. And describing a dip on the inside of the bone is kind of difficult, whereas we learn this so much better being able to see and feel it for ourselves. Next, we'll take a look at some crania with evidence of target practice. As before, these are also available for viewing on Sketchfab. These show a nice bit of variation of the different objects, arrows and activities used by archers at Vindolanda, and show a nice bit of variation in some of the weapon morphology and some of their practices. And here we actually now have the largest known collection of target practice in bone in the world, also available in 3D. But of course, I'll happily look at any others that are on offer. So, for a quick rundown of the trauma, here we have a large range of perforations across the front of bone that nicely fit the bodkin shape or square tapering of arrowheads found at Vindolanda. We can either measure these or actually do physical fits between 3D arrows and the perforation, which is super helpful when trying to investigate and demonstrate this trauma. There's an additional selection of perforations that are just a tad smaller, so I'll group these as a separate collection of perforations, but they still have that similar matching perforation shaping. And also a lancehead perforation on the occipital of all the crania. And so here we have a lancehead. And down the crania goes, fitting onto the lancehead on that occipital perforation. And from here, the angle of the beveling and flaking show the shooting direction because, as we know, gravity exists, and arrows go up, then down, not down, then up. And this repeated targeting on the same head shows the Roman archers honing their skills, able to shoot once every 6 seconds, whilst on horseback and without stirrups. And just to be inclusive, some weaponry are also available in 3D, and these can glisten so nicely. Metal's normally difficult to scan because of the reflective surface, but these came out really well because they're just that bit more dull when under the scanning light. Vindolanda has a lot of wood. Wood in fantastic levels of preservation that can show the daily lives and names of past communities. Wood can come out really nicely in 3D, particularly thanks to the rough and bumpy surface. These two miscellaneous tools may not be the most exciting wood available at Vindolanda, but there are certainly more exciting specimens available, such as a wooden shoe with surviving cobnails and damage on both sides taken from the Wooden Underworld and Fantastic Shoe collection available on display in the Vindolanda Museum. And the writing tablets. I'm sure I don't need to go into the significance of these because they are the Vindolanda writing tablets. These are precious, delicate artifacts that we as the public would love to read for ourselves, but of course we can't. They're too delicate, and most of us can't read cursive Roman script. 3D scanning wouldn't work in these either because the tablets are too dark and small, and the writing is essentially flush with the surface and thus 3D. However, we can work some 3D wizardry on photographs of the tablets, extracting out the whites and blacks, producing a nice 3D relief of the writing. Better yet, we can also 3D print this and hold it up to the light, allowing the writing to literally shine through into our eyes. Because this is a 3D printed relief, you can rub your thumb across the surface and feel the handwriting for yourself, ensuring that the museum is more inclusive of all individuals. Vindolanda also has a great collection of wooden combs with lots of different mark stamps and graffiti. Again, these are too small and busy for 3D scanning without a specialist scanner or perhaps CT scanning, but we could maybe apply the photo extraction principles from before. Whilst we lose the effect of the comb, and we absolutely cannot use this in 3D geometric analysis because it's from the photograph and not a precise 3D model, we can make out the stamp of the surface a bit more clearly, certainly compared to peering through the museum cabinet trying to make it out from afar. And this would be very useful for enhancing museum engagement. So far I've shown different options for artifact scanning, but how about some terrestrial scanning? This involves spending a good amount of time in the summer sun scanning the excavations at Vindolanda with a fire scanner. Certainly was not complaining about that day in the office. Now the great thing with digitizing excavations is that this area in yellow was excavated last year and filled in, but the scans provide a digitized preservation of the exposed area for viewing later in the future. Now terrestrial scanning is not without its woes. If you consider that the site at Vindalanda features lots of low walls across the area, that means that the fire scanner picks up the reconstructed fort in almost every single scan, and this accumulates errors really quite badly. This required more time than I do care to admit to manual line and fix all the scans individually so that the model looks just a tad more realistic without multiple walls protruding through, but I'm sure you'll agree it was definitely time well worth spent. And so here we have a digitized point cloud overview of the excavations from over 160 individual scans. Now the most immediately useful thing for this for archaeologists is probably being able to provide a layout of the map area with an accuracy of 11.5 millimeters across the entire site, and being able to update this with each annual excavation. The next step from this could involve processing the site into a 3D printed model to jigsaw together, but this does require a fair bit of computer tech that just isn't quite there yet for a site of this scale. So how can 3D be used in the museum environment? So last year we ran a little workshop showcasing for the public on getting hands-on with these models. This would start with the digital section so the public come up with some early thoughts of what's going on. Afterwards, they handled the digital models for themselves, essentially putting theory into practice and really engaging on different levels and senses and putting this theory into practice with the printed models. And then they will continue with the fun little mini target range to put us to shame basically at how bad we are at archery compared to the Romans. And then finally, they would vote on what part they enjoyed the most, whether it's the original museum display, the digital models, or the 3D printed models. So is 3D imaging actually worthwhile? Absolutely, undoubtedly. There will always be a place and importance for the traditional museum display, but with an effective digital strategy, we can really enhance the museum experience and facilitate much deeper levels of learning for all audiences. So where do I think the future of digital archaeology will lead? There are some options, and me personally, I love having options. There's digital displays that I've shown so far. We could do 3D printing for display in the museum. We can showcase digital models within virtual reality. But I believe the true gold standard may well lie in gamification. Taking the point cloud data, we can guide some 3D reconstruction fairly well, extracting the real-world structures and placing them into the game environment. But we are a bit stuck here for the wider context and the landscape around Vindolanda. Thankfully, we can use satellite and LiDAR elevation data and create a topography of the landscape around Vindolanda. We could even take this much wider and include other forts around Vindolanda and Hadrian's Wall, but this is a bit ugly for zooming in and exploring and does only show the modern day environment. However, this will provide a fantastic guide for reconstructing the point cloud model into a highly detailed environment. Now, I'm not a games designer by any means. This has mostly just been a bit of fun during lockdown, exploring some of the possibilities for a spectacular implementation of digitized archaeology. But we do have options for bringing these areas alive, such as creating pathways for computer characters to follow, allowing the farmers to farm, the guards to guard, and the shop workers to, well, sell and shop. We can even replicate this approach for providing different reconstructed interpretations of what Vindolanda may have looked like seasonally and in different occupation periods. But all of this is a bit of pipeline dreaming that may not come for quite some time in the future, but one can dream and dreams can come true. So to evaluate 3D scanning within archaeology, 3D scanners are portable and they are quick to learn how to use, largely thanks to the automatic processing available in modern scanners. 3D imaging is more appropriate than 2D cameras for image capture of a 3D object, ensuring that everything is in the 3D plane, achieving increased precision of the object topography. 3D models can also be stored indefinitely online and used to support records such as excavation reports. The models will also help to provide the sense of discovery across a range of potential applications. But 3D imaging is much slower than 2D photography, so really should be reserved for objects of high interest or true museum engagement gain. Most scanners do require a power source, which may be unavailable, and though 3D scanning is quick to learn, practice is definitely quite essential, and it takes much longer to master and achieve highly detailed and quite attractive online models. Most importantly though, digital and printed models have the issue of object authenticity. They're replications, they're not the original object. However, they do allow the public to physically engage with objects that they normally can't when walking around a museum or sat at home in their living room. The Tuba team look at even more than 3D, so to give a quick overview, I'm interested in developing methods for visualizing sites in new ways, not just 3D. So for example, here I develop methods for PXF analysis of soil, which we can apply to the excavations to chemically visualize the elemental distribution behind preservation layers or activity areas. So here we just have sulfur, but we can combine this with a nice heat map per each element, compare and combine them with a range of other elements to identify corroborating zones for interpreting the activity areas of this excavated area. Helga is interested in learning more about the preservation of leather at Vindolanda, using a multidisciplinary approach to the protein and leather analysis and including microcosm burial experiments. And Bowley is exploring the analysis of archaeological wool through several analytical techniques with the aim to develop a library of comparative wools, fibres and dyes. All of this is possible thanks to our multi-million-pound analytical suite available at the National Horizon Centre, or NHC. So please do get in contact if you'd like to know more or get involved for yourselves. It's also a great COVID one-way system in operation. If you would like to be kept up to date with some of our exciting happenings and activity, or just want to nosy on some of the archaeological research we do at Teesside University, please do feel free to follow our blog site at blogs.tees.ac.uk/tuba. And that's all. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it's been interesting and has given you some ideas for your own digital projects. Thank you very much.